Welcome everyone to our Wireside Chat for the month of June. I'm Paul Whitcover, the Associate Dean of the Online MFA. And Wireside Chat is something that we have on the second Monday of every month. And this being the second Monday of this month, here we are. And my guest tonight is Tiffany Trent. Tiffany is who, as many of you know, I'm sure, is a valued instructor in our MFA. She's the author of 8 young adult novels, the dark historical Hallowmere series from Wizards of the Coast, Mirrorstone, and the award-winning The Unnaturalists duology from Simon & Schuster, Saga. Her stories have appeared in many anthologies, including Corsets and Clockwork, Willful Impropriety, and the Mammoth Book of Southern Gothic Romance. With Stephanie Burgess, she co-edited the Locust Best Anthology finalist, The Underwater Ballroom Society. She lives in New Mexico, where she is finishing the first in a new adult fantasy series called The Rise of the Iron Lotus. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you, Paul.
And I'm going to throw your website URL into the chat so that people can visit. This is a brand new website, folks, so you can get in while it's still being stocked, and all kinds of good stuff is coming. So
yes,
and we're going to talk more about that. So, but first, I want to just ask you about your new series, The Rise of the Iron Lotus. What can you share about that?
So, The Rise of the Iron Lotus is a 6-book series that I'm going to be publishing under the auspices of a new publishing venture that I've started with another indie author. Our press is called Immoral Influence Publications, and my imprint in that press is called Moonhair. So it will come out under Moonhair Press, but our umbrella organization is Immoral Influence.
A lot of your titles sound like band names.
Well, yeah. I kind of have this penchant for titling things. So, but anyway, so there has been some delay in getting the series off the ground, just because I decided to join forces with Raven Velasco, the other author that I mentioned, and that's taken probably about 6 to 8 months to really try to get all our business stuff settled, and then she had a whole bunch of stuff going on. But the series itself is set in a secondary world that has a lot of influences from everywhere, from feudal China and Japan and Korea to, you know, just my own imagination, really, to my fascination with geological wonders. So, like, I have a map of the world. I had a map professionally done, so readers will get to see that map. And a lot of it is just so many different geological things that I'm just fascinated by ended up in my world. So,
what would be an example of a geological thing that you're fascinated by?
The stone forest in Yunnan, China. It's just basically what it says on the tin. It looks like a giant stone forest. It's these like thin columns of rock. I mean, China has fascinating geological formations. So,
but it's not like a petrified. It's not a petrified forest or anything like that.
Petrified. It's not a petrified forest. No, it's just the way the stone actually formed. And I wish I could give a geology lesson, but I'm not a geologist. However, you know, and it also the series also centers around my love of martial arts. So there's a lot of really fun martial arts that's specifically developed for the novel. So that's always a fun thing too.
Yeah, no, very cool. That's like a particular branch of world building. It's like devising your own martial art.
Yes, I developed. There's the Iron Lotus is actually a family martial art of the main characters. Both, well, the main character kind of changes over the course of the books from a father to his daughter, but
Hmm,
it's their family martial art. So that's what Iron Lotus is about. But I
that sounds
developed it
great.
myself. I mean, I can't actually like do it or anything, but I
Right,
developed it based on the martial arts that I've studied.
right.
So
Very cool. I can't wait to read it. And when do
thank
you think it's
you.
when do you think the first one is coming out?
Well, we've had a little bit of I was hoping it was going to be out by now, but it's probably more likely to be out in the fall. It's just taking a while to make sure I've got everything set
Sure.
since it's the first book, you know.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so, and then we have to, as indie publishers, it takes about 3 months for like the Library of Congress and Ingram and places like that to get their stuff rolling on their
Hmm,
end so that we can get review copies and things like that done. So
right.
I'm gonna push it out like towards September, probably September
Okay.
or October. Yeah.
Cool. So you've started this press with a fellow writer. Is this press exclusively devoted to the publication of your own works, or will you also be publishing the work of other writers,
Right now it's just us, but we may open it to other writers over time.
including
We're gonna,
students?
including students. I mean, it will just depend. Like for instance, we're doing a charity anthology for reproductive freedom. We're working on it right now called Midnight Crossroads, and it's the theme is things that take place at the crossroads at midnight, and you can interpret that as loosely as you'd like. Um,
Very cool.
and uh, and so we're taking that from anyone who wants to submit
Is that
to.
open? Is that open for submissions now?
It is open right now. I
And
can
where?
get you the information for the email because I think we set up a special email for it.
Oh,
Um,
okay. What?
and so I can get that information out to you.
Okay. I mean, I wish I could throw it into the chat right now. Um,
Let me check. I can
okay.
check because my brain is just really like a sieve. Um it sort of drops stuff if I'm not messing with it like all the time. So hang on a minute and I'll get it for you.
Okay, great.
Um,
I mean, the other thing I can
all
do is
right,
put it. Oh, okay.
I'll do it for you. Hang on. I've got it.
Okay.
It'll just
Thank you.
take me a minute. Uh,
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
sure.
So everyone,
Sure.
I want to encourage you while Tiffany's getting this to, please post your comments and questions into the chat. And this is a great opportunity, and I hope some of you will take advantage of this and submit to this incredible anthology that Stephanie's or Tiffany, I don't know why I said that, it was putting together.
It's okay. I have a cousin named Stephanie. You can imagine what that's like.
Yeah, you know what it
Um,
was? I think it was the mention of Stephanie Burgess in your bio that derailed
yeah,
me.
okay. Yeah, Stephanie and Tiffany. Okay, so I am trying to post that now to the chat. It should have gone up. Anthology at immortalinfluence.com.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah,
So,
and we'd love to see anything if you guys want to submit.
is there a word count limit that people should be paying attention to?
7,500 is our upper word limit. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Ooh.
uh,
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. I'm
um,
looking in the chat and I saw
oh, you're
somebody
gonna,
mention something cool.
yeah, are you into that anime?
MXTX. I know exactly who that person is talking about. MXTX is a big influence on me. The grant her books are Chinese. They're translated into English. It's the Grandmaster of Demonic cultivation, and they did a live action of it called The Untamed, and it's on Netflix. It's a huge influence.
Should I watch
Really love.
that?
I love it. Oh, I love it. I don't know if you'll love it, Paul, but I
Okay. All right. Well,
absolutely
that's good
adore
enough
it.
for me. I'm going to check it out.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. It's a little confusing in the beginning, so if you have any questions, feel free to say, I'm trying to watch this. Should I hold on or not? And I'll say, wait till episode 5, because then you'll
Right.
really get hooked.
I'll try not to pester you with questions.
No, it's
Because
cool.
that's what I'm doing tonight is pestering you with questions.
Oh,
So
no, it's all good.
So I want to like step back a little bit and talk a little bit about your career as a whole, or the progress of your career,
Okay.
I guess, because of like how you started and you've kind of gone down different paths, I suppose, in the publishing
Hmm.
biz and as a writer, and had some incredible successes, had some setbacks, and kind of worked out for yourself this new pathway that you're on. So can you talk a little bit about all of that stuff?
Oh, sure. So I think a big thing that shaped me a lot as a young person, really wanting to write, because I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to be a writer since I was 9 years old. That was all I wanted to be. And so then I was trying to figure out how to do it, because I was not from a background where that was a thing that you did. Um, Being an artist or being a writer was just not an option, not a choice. Um,
What was your background?
so I was born and raised in Roanoke, Virginia, in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and my neither of my parents had been to college. My mother was the daughter of dairy farmers in Wisconsin. My father was one of 12 children born to
Wow.
deep Appalachian poverty. And he climbed his way out of it basically by going into the military as soon as he got out of high school. And that's how I met my mother. Oh, yeah, I see somebody graduated
Yeah.
from Fleming in Roanoke. So anyway, it was it was just unfathomable for me to want to be a writer. They just didn't understand. And so they told me no. I was really, it was the only thing I was really good at doing. And, I wanted to go to college for creative writing. And they said, no, absolutely not. And I had a professor who was like the Yale representative in Roanoke, because I was taking advanced English. And he wanted to get me into Yale. He was going to help me with everything. And my parents said, no, absolutely not.
Wow.
You can't do this. You must, you must go. I think they looked at college as vocational school. That's what it seemed like to them. So I went into college originally in wildlife management at Virginia Tech as a wildlife management major. And you can guess how well that turned out. Um, and I was writing fantasy too at that time. And all of my professors, like when I would take a creative writing class, would yell at me and say, you're wasting your talent. Why would you do that? Why would you write this junk? Um, so, that just
Because
kept going.
they didn't approve of fantasy.
No, nobody approved of speculative fiction at all, especially not, young women writing it, right? So then I went and got my MFA at the University of Montana, and by then I was writing literary nonfiction. And I had some early success with literary nonfiction. And so I started sort of being very secretive about my genre fiction. And when I was in my MFA program, that's where I met Shannon Hale, who you may know, who's a really well-known children's writer, and she's written for all kinds of stuff. Uh, but back then we were forbidden from writing genre in our fiction workshops. And so we started calling it our forbidden fiction. And
Hmm.
we'd pass each other in the hallways and say, "How's your forbidden fiction?" I'm sure people thought we were right. I don't know what they thought we were writing, but it was fun, and we challenged each other to write our first novel over the course of the summer between, some terms. And she wrote what became The Goose Girl, which many of you who know her may be familiar with, a retelling of the Goose Girl fairy tale. And I wrote this honkin' big fantasy, which is part of The Rise of the Iron Lotus. I've been
Oh,
writing this thing
really?
for like 30 years. Yeah.
Wow.
So, so I've been attached to this world and this story for forever. So, then, you know, I just kept working on that. She kept working on her stuff. And then, she was at a conference. There's a very famous conference, um, called Life, the Universe, and Everything that is held in Utah every year, mostly attended by Mormon science fiction fantasy writers and editors. There's lots of LDS people involved in genre fiction.
Yep.
And there was an editor there who was looking for a dark fantasy writer, and because she wanted to launch a new series at a new imprint. So Shannon passed my name on to her. She contacted me. She explained what they wanted, which was like a sort of dark Victorian fairy kind of series. And so I had been wanting to do a retelling of the Marsh Girl's daughter, kind of like in the back of my mind. I had this idea, but I'd never played with it much. So I sent her a pitch like, "Hey, here's what I'm thinking." She's like, "Oh, that's great. Can you make that 10 books?" So this is my first book, okay? I was like, "Sure, I'll try." And so basically, I figured out that I was competing in this big, like, pitch fest to win this flagship YA series at Wizards of the Coast, Mirrorstone. So, and that became Hallowmere.
Okay.
So I ended up getting that Hallowmere series. And then, whoops, my light just went out. Um, and then after that, everything was going great. And then halfway through the series, there was a new CEO that came into Wizards and said, "We're not going to do this YA stuff anymore."
Ah,
And he just cut my series, like canceled it right in the middle.
that must have
And,
been devastating.
it was devastating, but my editor lost her job,
Yeah.
I mean, she got laid off. I mean, it was the whole thing. But so
How
the
do you pick
day
yourself
after
up as
that,
a writer from that sort of thing? I mean, you had 5 books
well,
under your
yeah,
belt, and
because,
you had 5 more to go. You must have had the whole thing planned out.
hmm
How
yeah,
did
and
how
we
did
had
you
all these
how did you go on?
co-authors.
How did you move on from that?
I don't know. I mean, I just kind of, the next day after we had just sent book 7 to copy edits. So I had just finished the 7th book. I was getting ready to start the 10th and final book because we had other co-authors in the middle.
Hmm.
I just was like, I just started what became the Unnaturalists the next day. I just was like, you
Wow.
know, I didn't feel like I had a choice. Uh, and then and then I just kept working on. I had this book that I was wanting to write about Charles Darwin, and I won the SCBWI grant that year with the draft. Any of you who want to write YA or children's books, I highly recommend joining the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI, because they have lots of really great grants, and they have a great conference, and they have mentors, and it's really wonderful. Anyway, they had like a draft grant. I applied for that with this draft of this Charles Darwin book because I wanted to go to London to research Darwin's home and the Natural History Museum. All that research, actually, I didn't write about Darwin. It ended up getting folded into the Unnaturalists.
Mm-hmm.
I still have that book about Darwin I want to do, but it was very frustrating because by then I had had agents who had seen ads for Hallowmere contact me and ask to represent me, which never happens usually, by the way. And they had represented me for a couple of years, but they wouldn't take any of my work out on submission because they kept telling me my work was not commercial enough.
Hmm.
And then I won this award, and I said, "Look, the judges think this is like the best draft they've seen all year. We need to use this momentum and sell this book."
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, "No, we're not going to do that." And I said, "Bye." Because I just was tired of fooling with that. So I went to London. I did all this wonderful research. Um, I came back. I wrote the Unnaturalists, and I got a new agent with that. And then that agent took the Unnaturalists out on submission, and I had to rewrite it. I had to tear it down to the bones twice and rewrite it before finally my editor at Simon and Schuster bought it.
And was that Joe Monte?
Actually, it was Nava Wolf who used
Oh,
to
okay.
work for Joe Monte. Yeah,
Okay.
and it was very difficult at that time because Neil Gaiman's editor really loved that book and really wanted to be able to buy it. And evidently, I could not quite satisfy what she needed me to do in revision in order for her to make an offer.
Mm-hmm.
So, so Simon and Schuster bought it,
Yeah.
and then they also offered for Tinker King. But then, and that was lovely. But then Barnes and Noble and Simon and Schuster got in a big fight right when the Unnaturalist was coming out. They were fighting about in-cap advertising, and Barnes and Noble, in order to try to force Simon and Schuster to pay what they wanted them to pay, said, "Okay, we are pulling all of your books except for the bestsellers, and we will not have them in the brick and mortar stores, and we will not allow people to order them in." So that really tanked my book sales.
Unbelievable. Tiffany, you like it's like this little black cloud is following you around for your
I
career.
felt,
I feel so
yes,
terrible for you.
yeah, yeah. So that was, and I'm telling people this because these are the kinds of things that can happen. And, you know, now with Simon and Schuster, my book is essentially orphaned because Nava is no longer there.
Right.
And so, then I tried to sell, I tried to adjust what is now Rise of the Iron Lotus into a YA, and we tried to sell it. Nobody would take it. And I was like, I knew it wasn't YA anyway.
Right.
And so
Do
I
you
just
feel though
decided
that
I wanted.
do you feel like in trying to sell this book, do you feel like that some of that bad luck that you experienced from Wizards of the Coast and Barnes and Noble, Simon and Schuster, all of that kind of attached itself to you as a property in some way, and publishers were like, well,
Well,
look at the sales figures,
I
we
think it,
can't take this person on, and so on.
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think it attached itself in terms of the sales figures.
Yeah.
If your sales figures are low in traditional publishing, they're not as willing to take you on. Now, I still have things that I think would be better for traditional. And if I try to go out with them again, I'm probably going to have a pseudonym
Yeah.
and go out as debuting a pseudonym because it's just like, um, many of you may know the really great fantasy and science fiction writer Kate Elliott. That is not her name. She had to change her name and go under that pseudonym because her original name bombed.
And that's happened.
So
I mean, she's by far, not the only one. The same thing happened to, the writer that became famous under the name Robin Hobb, and many other
yeah,
writers.
there are many writers that has happened to. And so I fully expect that if I do get anyone interested in these other projects that I have in mind, that they'll tell me that I need to do that.
So Tiffany,
And that's okay.
knowing you, I bet you've already come up with some great pseudonyms.
I have some, yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to share them because that'd be like outing
No, that's
yourself
fine.
in advance. But I knew
Yeah,
I
no.
knew you would.
Yeah. I have
So I
some.
mean,
Yeah,
so
I have some.
hearing all of that, it's like no wonder you want to start your own publishing house or imprint, right?
Yes.
Because now you have control that you didn't have in all of those other situations. But I mean, that
Yeah.
it cannot have been easy either to learn all of the stuff that you need to know to run a publisher.
No, it's taken me about 3 years. I mean, I'm not saying it would take everyone that long. I'm really cautious. I really have to feel super comfortable. So I probably take way too long and feel like I have to take every class and I have to learn everything and I have to go to every conference. Like you probably don't need to do as much as I've been trying to do. But I just feel like my technical skills are maybe behind what a lot of people in indie might be. So I'm very slow about that and but and I have all this other stuff going on in my life. So,
Right.
it's taken me a really long time to actually get to the point where I feel like I'm just about ready to publish.
Hmm.
Um, but also just, I am lucky that I do have communications in my day job background. I was a science communicator for about 20 years, but trying to communicate in the arts is different. So I'm having to just kind of learn how to communicate and market a little
Hmm.
differently than what I did before. Yeah. But yes, having that control, it means a lot because one thing that I constantly kept getting was just, you're too literary, you're too commercial, you're too this, you're too that, and all of it amounted to, you're still not enough. Um, so I just like sort of decided, at least with my adult stuff, because I feel like adult fantasy and science fiction is very hard to break into right now.
Why do
It
you think
seems to
that
be.
is?
Well, it's just an observation that it feels like, well, we're kind of in a golden age in a sense that we have so many amazing writers, and that is wonderful. And I'm so glad that I can name all these people as colleagues and as, people that I know. But at the same time, it makes it harder if you're trying to be a new voice, it
Hmm.
seems to me, at least in the adult. I think debut is much more readily sought after, almost to the point of ridiculousness in YA and middle grade. But in adult, I think it becomes a little harder. I think people want the more established voice, and it's kind of harder to establish yourself. And maybe this is just my perception from my little black cloud that's following me, but I just had a really interesting experience trying to shop this book to agents and having them be like, I love this. I love everything about it, but I'm not going to represent it,
Because they didn't feel they could sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
super frustrating.
yeah, I mean, one told me I have no editorial vision for this. And I said, I'm not sure what that means. Could you clarify what you mean? And she said, oh, it's written so tightly, I can't figure out how I would advise you to change it. And I'm like, well
Why?
then
Why
if
does
you think it's
something have to be changed?
aren't you an agent? Why don't we let the editor do their editor job and you do your agent job? And it was just admittedly, I know many people go through lots and lots of agents, and I was really lucky early on in my career to not have to do that. But I went through about 12 or 13, and it took like 2 years, and I was just like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, I don't blame you. That's again super frustrating.
Yeah. I was just like,
I mean,
no, no.
I think not to turn you into an object lesson or anything, but I can see in the comments that many people understand this that your perseverance, and I have to say you know you seem pretty optimistic about things. I really admire you for having had the fortitude, to endure all those slings and arrows. I think it would have
Well, thank
I
you.
think it would have stopped a lot of other writers.
Well, I have wanted to stop. I have wondered why I don't. Many, many times. It has been often very hard to convince myself to go on, but then and again, it also feels like I don't know what to do if I don't do this. Like I don't know who I am if I don't do this.
Oh,
And
you've got to keep on doing it. I mean, I've read some
yeah.
of your work. I've heard you read your work. I mean, you're a fabulous writer. You don't need me to tell you that, but I'm telling you anyway.
Oh, thank you.
I
That's
just
so
love your
sweet of
stuff, and
you.
I'm excited about the new stuff. So I'm
Thank
glad
you.
you endured.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to. I mean, it's tough out there, I mean, I'll tell you one experience I had where this is funny. I was on a panel with George R. R. Martin. It was just me and George.
Oh, wow.
And we were meant to be talking about careers like this, right? And he picked up my book like before we got started, was just sort of perusing it and da 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 and all this. So then the panel got started, and he picks up my book, he holds it up to the audience, and he says, "You see this?" He said, "Never do this."
Oh my God.
And he said, "Never, never ever sign a work for hire contract." And he looks at me, and I mean, I suddenly felt like I was pinned on a board,
Right,
like a
right.
bug. And he goes, "Why did you do this?" And I said, "Well, sir, um, may I respectfully ask when you started to publish?" And he said, it was way back when. And I said, "I'm starting now. And I knew this was a gamble when I took it. And I took the gamble to try to get my name out there. And, I realized what I signed. I knew I was signing my rights away when I did the work for hire. But I also knew they were going to give me a huge marketing push that maybe another place might not have, You never know.
Right.
And he just really didn't like that. He just kept rumbling about how I'd screwed up my career and how, you know, what
Just
an awful thing.
inexcusable behavior.
And I was just like, I just met you.
Right.
I mean, like I was like, how could, it was really embarrassing because that was the last thing I expected anyone to do.
No
But,
kidding.
you
That's like
know,
a that's
but
a
it,
dickish move on the order of something Harlan Ellison would have done.
yeah, I know, right? And yeah, it was totally like writing Game of Thrones, right? I mean, like,
But that's how
but
some of those guys, especially those old school guys, from that generation, and that's how they see it. Sad to say, but it's not
yeah,
that
I mean,
way.
but he
Thank
had a
God.
very, he had a very strong perception of how one does things. And I was not doing things the way he thinks or thought they should be done, and he
Right.
was going to let everyone know. And so, um, you
How
know,
about
I
how about
just,
selling your series to the movies before you've even finished writing it? That's probably a no-no.
yeah, I mean, that should be.
Come on, George.
Um,
Very,
but I'm not
uh,
trying to throw off on him either, because he's big stuff and he's helped a lot of people I know.
no, he
But I mean,
has. He has. It's
you
just
know,
disappointing.
he yeah, he has. And so, but it was surprising, I guess, to see that perspective and just to realize that um we all of us start at a different point and we all have to make choices about our career, and sometimes we have to gamble a little bit, like we have to
Absolutely.
decide, well, somebody's gonna put uh this big marketing budget behind me. Is it worth it? um Maybe it gets my name out there faster. uh you know it's You got to kind of think about those things.
Yeah. No, absolutely. What you did is a legitimate thing to do. I've written work for hire stuff. It's a trade-off, and you go into it
Yeah,
presumably with your eyes open, and you're
definitely.
it's not the only book you're ever going to write.
Right, exactly. That's the thing too, is like it was my first series, and it was a lot of fun. I didn't have a big emotional attachment to it
Right.
either. So that made it easier to
But I mean,
do.
you must have learned a ton from doing that. I mean, not only about like
Mhm.
how to write a novel, but how to write a series, which is a whole different.
Going to be one little book, and it turned out that you know, it was something much more than that.
Right.
So I had
Right.
to figure out all of a sudden from one book to 10, you know, like, so,
Yep.
and I had to help create the series Bible. And, it got really complicated because we threw all the characters into all these different dimensions. And I mean, it was pretty cool. It was
Yeah.
cool, but it was a lot of work.
It's yeah. No, it sounds fun though. I mean, that must have been a blast to be working on that.
It was fun. It was really fun. And they built a really cool website for it that had, so basically I had my characters who showed aptitude for magic were sent to this basically like juvenile detention home in 1866, um, for young girls. And it turns out that all of them had magical abilities of some sort or another. But they actually made a really cool map of the house itself. This creepy old, Civil War
Yep.
era house that had been made into this detention home.
Very
So,
cool.
um, but yeah, you just, and I mean, I think the one thing, if I had been able to, one thing I really admired about Shannon was she was very forward thinking. She had lots of books she wanted to write, but she let the Goose Girl be first because she felt like that would be the best thing to start with. while all along, kind of in her heart, she wanted to write this book called Austin Land, which you guys may have heard of, that got made into a movie, about this like summer camp for Jane Austen lovers. And it has like a lot of comedy and romance and stuff. But she knew that wouldn't be the best book for her to start her career
Hmm.
with. So I wish I'd thought a little bit more, sort of looked at things more broadly and thought, how do I want to start my career? What are all these projects I have in mind, instead of, it seems a little pell-mell and,
Right. I mean,
kind of like,
I feel like you have to take the opportunities that are offered to you. I mean, you had somebody come to you and say, "Hey, do you have, I mean, essentially, do you have a
did you,
novel that we can publish?" And you said,
yeah,
"Yes, I do." And why
yeah,
wouldn't you say that? I
why
mean,
wouldn't I say that? Right.
right?
But
Always be saying yes. I can't remember who it is that says that, but
yeah. I mean, I definitely wanted to like err on the side of yes rather than no. Um, but
apparently my
um,
video is gone. Can people not see
okay,
me? Can you
I
see
can
me?
see you.
Oh,
I can
okay.
see you.
All right. Oh, other people see me. All right, I'm good. Phew.
The
So
Invisible Man.
I know, right? So let's pivot a little bit and talk
Okay.
about what are the things that you think the students that are coming into our program, what are the things that they need to know about writing? What are the kinds of craft issues that you see cropping up most frequently, and what are some of the solutions to those issues?
Mm. You know, one thing I want to say is that lately I've seen a lot fewer craft issues than I used to. So I feel like our prospective students are really studying their craft before they come in, I think, because I've seen several students lately where I felt like they had a really good handle on the basics, and I wasn't too worried about that. Um, the things though that I have seen in the past, um, were students who were writing, especially in speculative fiction, and it wasn't really a genre they were super familiar with. And I felt like I just wanted to ask them to go and read a whole bunch of stuff and then come back. Like read Octavia Butler, read Ted Chiang, read all these people, and
Mhm.
then, come back.
Do you think that's
Uh,
because, like, and just to stick with speculative fiction as an example, do you think that's because sometimes people want to write in a genre that they've seen in movies, they've seen it on TV, but they don't necessarily know the literary history that's associated with it?
yes, I think that's exactly what I'm saying. Uh,
Okay.
I think I think you see something cool in a show or on TV, and you don't, um yeah, you don't have a really good foundation in the literature itself. And therefore the moves you make are uh not as, maybe you could avoid some things by reading a whole lot more broadly and learning how other speculative fiction authors handle their craft. You could avoid a lot of issues with plot and dialogue and
Yep.
cardboard characters.
Yep.
Cardboard villains are a real problem. There's a lot of, good versus evil, and the villain is horrible. And I've said to some of my characters, have you ever, to my characters, my students, I'm sorry, students, you're not characters. My bad. Um, I've said to some of my students, hey, have you ever considered a situation in which this villain, this antagonist of yours, might be right? And that freaks them out. that really freaks them out to suddenly have someone saying you need to allow your antagonist to be right sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's just so much, it's too easy for the antagonist to be flat and cardboardy, and
Yeah.
uh,
And it,
especially in like a fantasy world, because we've grown up on seeing that.
right. I almost wonder, like, I'm kind of riffing off a comment that somebody made here. Let me read the comment and then I'll riff on it a little bit. Would you say that it is a side effect of the internet age, basically making access to writing craft lessons easier? I'm thinking along the lines of Brandon Sanderson's lectures online or the writers of the future free courses online. I remember, I'm a bit older than you, and I remember when I was starting to become a serious professional writer and everything. Um, I went to Clarion in 1980. That was my first real exposure to, like, the craft of writing. Um, and there wasn't anything after that either for a long, long time for me personally. Um, and I had to get my craft lessons out of novels and short stories, the work of other writers. And certainly prior to, the mid 20th century, that's how every writer learned how to write. But now there's this proliferation of craft books. I mean, we use them in our program because some of them are quite good. But there's a proliferation of craft books. There's these online lectures that I know that are one of our, that um, Jesse kindly put into the chat. And I almost feel as though a lot of writers are pulled toward these sources of information and away from books, as though the how-to books, the craft books, are going to be better. They're going to teach them more about how to write than an actual novel will.
Mm-hmm. I I feel like it needs to be somewhat of a mix. I mean, you know, I'm I'm definitely behind you, but I still there wasn't much available, sort of in the dawn of the internet. And, I remember being a member of the online writing workshop that Charles Coleman Finley used to run
Oh yeah,
way
sure.
back in the dark ages.
Yes.
Yes.
I helped to start that workshop.
Did you
Yes, I did.
really? Well,
And in
I was
fact,
in
I
there.
had Charlie's job before him. I turned that job over to Charlie when
Really?
I left. Yes.
Oh my goodness, I had no idea. That's amazing. It was a wonderful thing. It was a wonderful thing back then because it was so hard to connect with people
Yep.
as a writer of that sort of thing, I mean, I feel like I come at fiction in a really weird way because a lot of my training is in nonfiction, and I wasn't, I almost got kicked out of my fiction workshop in my MFA because I had like a little tiny speculative element in one story. And so, you know, uh, I think what's so lovely about our program is that you can write speculative fiction, but um, a lot of times I think you still need that book background. I mean, movies and TV are great. Craft books, I think, can be really essential because they can help you think a little differently, or they can maybe help sort out, um, some issues that you may be having that you're not realizing, or you're not realizing how maybe you could try to fix them. But still, I think reading books and seeing how people do things like is really the best way, and reading broadly, not just what's popular now, of course,
Hmm.
but going back and reading from all the different eras, um, because then you can see. of course, how the field has evolved. You know, it's so yeah, I think you do need to have that contact with literature because, even if you're watching the latest Dune, you aren't getting the craft. You are getting the craft of filmmaking, but you are not getting the craft of literature,
Hmm.
that Frank Herbert put into every line of that first book. Um,
Yeah.
so I
I
I
mean,
do think.
I love those Dune movies, the new ones, but part of the
Mhm.
reason is because the memory of the books are so densely packed into my mind. I read them 100 times and the filmmaker did an extraordinary job of keeping that packing that same density into the movies. I mean, they're very full of the books, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Um, yes. I mean, he originally wrote Dune, or according to him, Dune was originally written in verse.
Oh my
And
God.
then, yes, he wrote it as a humongous, dense poem first. Then he switched it over into prose. And that's why it has that heft in those lines, you know? But
Right?
Dune again, that's yet another book that was so weird that nobody wanted to publish it,
No, right, exactly.
and so that's where perseverance yet again comes in.
Yeah.
You know, be be weird. That's like
No,
my,
exactly. Let
you
your
know,
freak flag fly for sure.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Tiffany,
Yeah.
let me ask a question out of the chat here because we're coming down to the end of our hour. Incredibly, this has gone really fast. Um, so
Yeah.
so Scott says, just finished 50,000 words of my horror novel. Yay, Scott. And seeing the prices of editorial services is scary. I know a work has to be edited and then various forms of editing. I know after the writer has finally done their own editing. Any advice on finding reasonable editorial services as well as proofreading services? And Scott, if you could just throw into the chat really quick, are you referring to like specifically self-publishing, or are you also referring to like all kinds of publishing, including traditional publishing? He says traditional.
Traditional. Okay. Um, yeah. Um, for traditional, I would worry most if you have trouble proofreading or copy editing your own thing. I would look more for that. I mean, the only time I would look for a developmental editor when I was doing traditional um is if I really felt like I didn't know how to tell the story, or I was really, really anxious about whether what I wanted to come across is coming across. But usually, it seems to me that if you want to make it look polished for your submission package, then you can find them in lots of places. Reedsy is one place where actually pro editors and pro copy editors, people who've actually worked at traditional publishing houses, you can hire them. But you can find them. Let me just uh, put in a little plug for the Editorial Freelancers Association. It's called EFA.
Yep.
That's a great place to start trying to find somebody. I wouldn't really recommend Fiverr because you just don't know what you're going to get there.
Yeah.
You may get
Could do
somebody
more
good.
harm
I
than
mean,
good.
yeah, don't get me wrong, but I think going to EFA first is a good place to start.
Yeah. And but this is another thing that I see a lot more of is like people who are going the traditional route are interested before their work is seen by an agent, let alone an editor. They're worried about, do I need to get it professionally edited? Do I need to have it copy edited? Do I need to have it proofread? And like Tiffany's saying, um, you know, it can be helpful in terms of your package, but really, your work is not going to be thrown out or rejected by an agent or accepted by one because it's pretty, because it's gone through a copy editing process. It's going to be accepted or rejected on the strength of the work itself. In other words, have you told the story well? That's what's going to matter, because they can always hire a copy editor. They can hire a developmental editor. I mean, that's a different kettle of fish, sort of. But if you go the traditional route and your agent accepts your book and you sell it to Simon and Schuster or somewhere else, you're going to have a developmental editor. That's part of the package that you get, right? Joe Monte at
Yeah,
Simon and Schuster is going to be your developmental editor and your line editor. He'll
right,
do it all. So you don't have to
right.
worry that much about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't spend that money if you're going to go the traditional route. I mean, like I said, if I was really worried about my grammar, I know some people, have trouble with things that they can't see, like grammar or whatever. It's just very hard. Then yeah, I might hire a copy editor or proofreader to clean things up. But I would not do a dev editor because that's what your editor is going to do, like Paul
Yeah.
just said.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
would
I mean,
let the
that's
I yeah, and I would let the agent, kind of be the one who, if you get accepted by an agent, and then the agent will help you with that too, to get you prepared. A
yeah,
lot of them
if your
anyway.
agent looks at your manuscript and says, you know what, I think you need a copy edit, then I would say, great, let's get a copy edit, right? Because you have to trust your agent that they know what they're talking about. Even though, as Tiffany's tale illustrates, sometimes they don't know what they're talking about.
Sometimes they don't. Yeah, that's a whole other. We could do a whole
Yeah, well, we'll have you back
thing
to
on that.
talk more about that. I think that's really important, but it's
Part
very difficult to navigate. It's such a personal thing. And it can even be like, I know plenty of people who've had experiences with a particular agent that are awful. And then other people have that same agent and they love that agent, and that agent has done
and they're
terrific work for
brilliant.
them. Yeah, so who's to
Yep,
say?
yep, yep. I know that to be a fact as well. Yep, yep.
Um, So we're coming down to the end here. Just wanted to ask you a couple more questions, or maybe even just one more question. And that is, not to put you on the spot or anything, but what are the foundational books for you as a writer? Like the books that you come back to again and again as for sources of inspiration, and maybe that inspired you to become a writer in the first place.
Oh, well, definitely as a child, A Wrinkle in Time. A Wrinkle in Time meant everything to me as a kid, especially because I wrote to Madeline L'Engle and she wrote back.
Oh yeah,
And and when I saw her signature, uh, it really just made me realize that real people do this, and maybe I could do it too.
just incredible.
Um,
What a
yeah,
gift. What a
just
gift she gave you.
yeah, she really did. I always had hoped to meet her, but I didn't get a chance. Um, I'm trying to think of another book that's just a real touchstone. Wow. There are so very many. Um, I mean, of course, Tolkien, but I wanted to come up with something
Right.
a little bit different than that. When I was a teen, there was a series called The Chronicles of the Chase Who Leave by Jennifer Robertson, and that one I just loved so much. Um, I really, um, I really, I read that one over and over. It was like 8 books or something.
And what was that called
Um,
again? The Chronicles of
Chronicles of the Chase Who Leave, spelled Cheysuli.
Cheyfuli.
Suli.
Chafely.
S S
SU, Chasely.
Suli.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Okay. Wow.
yeah,
I've
it's kind of
never
wild.
heard of
It's
that.
yeah, yeah, I loved that series as a teenager. Um, Orlando by Virginia Woolf was I studied all of Virginia. I took a course in grad school that was all Virginia Woolf and D.H. Lawrence. So I've read everything the two of them have written. And I loved Orlando. Absolutely loved it.
Great books.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, oh wow, let me think. The Blue Sword by Robin McKinley and The Hero in the Crown were huge for me.
yeah,
Um,
McKinley's a great writer.
yeah, yeah. Definitely big. Uh, love that stuff.
Well, I appreciate your sharing that stuff. I mean, I learned a new series I'm going to go check out. So we're at the end of our hour. I want to thank everyone for coming, and I especially want to thank our guest, Tiffany Trent, Stephanie Trent, for 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 coming. And Tiffany, we are definitely going to have you back at some point to talk some more about the agent thing that we briefly got into. Um,
Okay. Well,
and
thank you.
yeah, and on that note, and we never got to talk about your writing shack. I really wanted to talk about that too. I forgot about
The
it.
writing, yeah, the writing shock. Oh, somebody mentioned the Cushiel series, Jacqueline Carey in the thing. Yes. Oh, big one. Can I say one more book?
Sure.
A big one for me that I discovered way too young, was Maya by Richard Adams.
Oh yeah.
I
What a
I
weird
had
book. Talk about
Isn't
weird,
it
right?
weird? But it really had this really huge impact. I read it when I was 12, which was
Yeah.
not, who it was for, but yeah. But
All
anyway,
that guy's books were super weird and all super different,
it was before the era of author branding. He was very
right?
lucky in that
Yeah.
regard. Yes. Yeah, I thought I was getting another Watership Down, and
Right.
that is not what that
Surprise.
book is.
Yeah, I see. I went from
Surprise!
Watership Down to Shardik, and I was like, what
Shardik,
the?
yeah. What in the
What?
world is this? Yeah, I know. But anyway, I wanted to thank everybody for coming. I saw a bunch of my students. I saw you guys. I really appreciate you being here. And,
Okay.
it's been fun. So,
All right. Good night, everybody.
all right, take care.